Welcome to Pieces for My Puzzle. I'm your host, Nikki Shipp, and I'm excited to be sharing with you my life with a son on the spectrum. This podcast is for anyone who is looking for quick tips and perspective, but most of all, for hope and inspiration. So sit back, relax, and let's put the pieces together. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Pieces for My Puzzle. I'm your host, Nikki Shipp. Thank you so much for joining us today. Last week, we had the great pleasure of having Ms. Jennifer Kaufman on the show. If you did not get a chance to check out that episode, please do. We had a wonderful conversation. She is the author of a book called Grandparenting on the Spectrum, A Journey from Both Sides of the Desk. I really greatly appreciated our conversation, and thanks again, Jennifer, for being on the show. This week, I'm especially excited to introduce to you Meagan Sardana. She is a licensed speech-language pathologist and founder of By the Book Tutoring Services. Having spent years supporting students with a wide range of communication and reading needs in California public schools, Meagan saw firsthand how many bright, capable children were overlooked and misunderstood due to undiagnosed dyslexia. Her passion is to educate parents, teachers, and school administrations about the true nature of dyslexia, highlighting its strengths, dispelling misconceptions, and providing individuals with evidence-based support they deserve. Meagan uses structured literacy programs rooted in Orton-Gillingham, I hope I'm not butchering that, Meagan, principles to help children and adults become confident, successful readers. Her mission is to replace confusion and shame with clarity, hope, and lasting achievement for those with dyslexia. Please welcome Meagan to the show. Thank you so much for being here, Meagan.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you on the show. You know, this topic is really near and dear to my heart. I've had lots of people on the show to talk about dyslexia, but I always like to bring different perspectives because you have a different modality compared to some of the others that I've interviewed on the show. So I always like to give perspective to parents across the board. So I was really excited to be able to have you on the show and share with our audience about everything that you do. So thanks again for being here. I really
Yes,
appreciate it.
I appreciate the opportunity to address your audience. So
Yeah,
thanks.
absolutely. Well, I just kind of want to jump right in. I ask everybody this question, especially with dyslexia, but how do you define dyslexia and what are some of the most common misconceptions that you find that people have about it?
Okay, so dyslexia would be defined as a specific learning disability, and based on the fact that people have difficulty reading and spelling with speed and accuracy. Okay, so people with dyslexia can read, but they just don't read fluently.
Got it.
And the reason is that it's usually based on difficulty with phonological awareness skills and phonological processing skills. So
Got
let's
it.
talk about that word, phonological.
Yeah, it's a big
Yeah,
word.
yeah. Phonology is much simpler than it sounds. Phonology is a study of the sound system of a language. So it's
Okay,
sound system awareness skills.
interesting.
So yes, yeah. So skills such as being able to hear and recognize a rhyme, uh, the ability to count the number of words in a sentence,
Right.
and the ability to count the number of syllables in a word. Okay, and this is all before you even learn to read. Now, there's
Right.
a subset of phonological awareness skills called phonemic awareness skills, and these are particularly important for
Mm-hmm.
reading.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we'll break down that word phonemic. Phoneme is the individual speech sound. Okay,
Okay.
and you have to be able to manipulate the sounds in a word before you can start to read. So it's things like being able to delete a sound or take away a sound, to
Okay.
add a sound, or to switch one sound for another. So we
Okay.
can do a little back and forth here. To give you an example, say we have the word bat, okay, and
Okay.
I ask you to take away the b sound. What word
Right.
do we have now?
At.
It's at, exactly.
I was like,
Okay,
is this a
and
quiz? I was like,
yeah,
I'm just kidding.
and then if I tell you to add a sound in the front of the word. Now what word do we have?
Cat.
Cat. Good. And if I
Right.
ask you to change that k sound for a s sound, our word now becomes
Sat.
exactly. Okay, so those are skills that if you have those, then you're good to go. You're ready to start a phonics program. That's matching a letter to a sound. But if you
Right.
don't have those skills, you're going to need to acquire those skills before you can start learning to read. Okay, and
Okay.
yeah. And then misconceptions. So we just talked about this being sound-based, right?
Right.
But a lot of people think that that reading is primarily a visual skill.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something that it's really matching that sound to the letter and knowing how to manipulate sounds again before you ever look at a letter or a word. And
Right.
another misconception is that this has something to do with intelligence.
Right.
Dyslexia has absolutely nothing to do with intelligence or IQ. And if I can just address IQ tests also, because you're a parent who's been in a lot of IEP meetings,
Don't
right?
get me started. Yeah.
I know, I know. And so that IQ, we think that is a measure of how smart someone is, but it's not a static number. Kids
Right.
can learn, and that could jump 20 points from year to year. So it's
Right.
actually very dynamic. And
Right.
so yeah, so dyslexia has nothing to do with intelligence.
Wow. And I love that you really are explaining how dyslexia is not just a visual thing. I didn't even know that there was the auditory part of it, the auditory piece of it was so important. I didn't know that until we started delving into Drayson's dyslexia tutoring. And then I was like, oh my gosh, like I've been approaching this incorrectly the whole
Oh,
time.
I'm so glad you're sharing this, because the other thing I wanted to mention was, since we think it's primarily visual before we
Yeah.
know, then we're telling our kids to sound it out.
Yes.
And that's exactly what they cannot do.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so if you're telling
Yeah.
your child,
Drayson couldn't
yeah,
do it.
sound
Yeah.
it out, um, don't do that anymore. And if you
Mm-hmm.
have been telling them that, don't worry about it. Don't beat
Yeah.
yourself up.
Yeah.
You, you know,
Yeah.
you didn't
Yeah.
know any better. And
Yeah,
neither did I
I wish I would
until
have
I
I
learned
wish
it.
I would have met you like 6 years ago, because
I
when we went to
know.
started down this journey, it was like, and I remember when I had that realization, I felt almost like mom guilt, like, oh my gosh, I've been approaching this incorrectly the whole time. It's just because I didn't have the understanding of it until we kind of started delving down, like I said, the tutoring aspect of it. And I was so surprised because, and I was like pointing to the paper. I was like,
Hmm.
look, like I was
Yes.
trying to direct him and he was just not having it. And I was like, now that makes complete sense how you explain that. So I love that you're explaining that to our audience too, because I do think that that's a huge misconception, is that we don't realize that there's a huge auditory component
Yes.
to just reading in general.
Exactly. And I'm very
Interesting.
lucky to have come to this profession late in life, because I already had my kids, went
Mm-hmm.
through the developmental years, and so I'm very compassionate about parents,
Yeah.
because I know uh, some leads we follow up on and we do the best we can,
Yes.
but we all need to be educated. So.
Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, which signs of dyslexia do you see the most often in children, and how early can these signs appear? Because
Mhm.
I know it's really common. Well, I think it's pretty, at least from what I've seen in the neurodivergent population, it's pretty common. So,
Yes.
what are some of the signs that you typically see?
Okay, now one very early sign, maybe around 2 years old, might be that you have a late talker. So kids should have 50 words by the
Mm-hmm.
time they're 2 years old, right? Now,
Yes.
just because they're a late talker doesn't necessarily mean they're going to have dyslexia, but that would
Right.
be a clue to look for it.
Okay.
And then you might have difficulty acquiring vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
And you might mix sounds up in words, like switch them, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's developmentally appropriate until a certain age. For example, if you say biscotti instead of spaghetti, that's
Mm-hmm.
fine. But if you're 5 or 6 and still doing that, that may
Mm-hmm.
be a sign that you're switching those sounds. right?
Yes.
And then, yes, exactly. And maybe even having trouble with some grammatic elements in language.
Okay.
Difficulty following directions, especially multiple stepped directions. And then sometimes you have directional difficulties, which makes you mix up that P, B, and D letter. Now, it's a myth that people write backwards with dyslexia because, again, developmentally, a lot of kids, might write the letter in the wrong direction, but after a
Right.
certain age, again, you want to see
Right.
that corrected. Yeah. And maybe difficulty with uh, before and after, and right and left. Oh, I know. Multisyllabic words can cause them a lot of difficulty, both
Okay.
when they are speaking and when they go to read. So
Okay.
those are some of the signs that you can look for. Yeah. And I used to
Yeah.
work with kids on their oral language skills who had dyslexia. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
Drayson was, it's interesting that you say that because in the beginning, his pronunciation was great and he was doing great with simple words. But I noticed, we didn't catch his dyslexia until he was in third grade. And
Hmm.
so I don't know is that an early age to catch dyslexia or is
Oh my
it
gosh.
not an early age? I guess is what I'm asking because my thought is in the beginning I didn't notice it. I mean, he was still doing the simple words, but as he started to get into second grade and towards the end of his second grade year and then into third grade, I noticed he was struggling with some of the pronunciations of the words. Like he was pronouncing them, but he was mixing up, like you said, the letters. And
Hmm.
so he was still saying the word, but he was mixing it up. And that's when I started to kind of get cued that maybe there was something else going on.
Exactly. And that is so typical that we catch dyslexia in the third grade. That is very
Wow.
typical.
Okay. So I
Yes.
was on par on that one at least. I was like,
Yes.
oh,
Oh,
I'm late.
absolutely.
I thought I was
Absolutely. Because
late.
at first, there might be kids who struggle with certain parts of reading, but then pick it up,
Right.
so that's very typical. And
Yeah.
that's early. And we can catch it earlier. And yeah, but we need to screen for that in the schools.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely. That's interesting. Well, that makes me
Hmm.
feel a little bit better because I thought
Oh, yes.
again, mom guilt. I'm like, why didn't I catch this? Why didn't I
Yes.
see this earlier? And so it was one of those for me personally. But why do you feel, and that kind of leads me into my next
Mhm.
question, why do you feel that dyslexia is so frequently missed or misunderstood by schools and educators? Because that was something that I really had to fight to get them to look at Drayson's original school. It was a really hard battle for me and they were very dismissive about it. Oh, he reads fine. His
Right.
pronunciation's fine. He reads fine.
Hmm.
And I'm like, but he's not comprehending. What I noticed was he was struggling with directions, like you said, word
Hmm.
problems, math,
Hmm.
like basic, simple math word problems he was struggling with. And there was a comprehension piece that he was just not grasping. And that's really what led me to think maybe this is dyslexia, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
So what do you find is frequently missed or misunderstood in those systems?
So we just talked about screening. Our kids need to be screened, but our
Yes.
earliest states that adopted screening did so in the early to mid 2010s.
Oh my
If you can
gosh.
believe that. Oh my gosh, yes. And Arizona didn't start screening until 2022, 2023
Yep.
school year. And California, where I live, didn't start it until the beginning of this year. We finally have
Wow.
universal screening for reading difficulties in kindergarten through second grade.
That's
So,
wonderful.
yes, it's wonderful, but oh my gosh, it's way too late. Well, why
Right.
is that?
Right.
And I think that a lot of it, some of it is teacher education.
Yes.
And so more and more teachers are getting trained in Orton-Gillingham. You had mentioned that at the
Mhm.
beginning of, so more teachers are getting trained in that and now know what dyslexia, but I honestly think it's a money problem.
Mhm.
And that's why
Oh yeah.
schools haven't done that. I have here the California Dyslexia Guidelines. Okay, but this was written in 2017. We didn't have
Mhm.
universal screening. one of the best
Yeah.
synopses of what dyslexia is and effective ways to address it, honestly,
Okay.
which is interesting because on page 3, they say here that there's a notice that the guidance in California dyslexia guidelines is not binding on local educational agencies or other entities. So this is very well documented
For
with
those of you
science.
for those of you
Yes.
listening, I'm shaking my head. Sorry.
Oh, I
Go
know.
ahead.
I know. It's
Oh my
crazy.
God.
And that's why I was in school working with kids under the eligibility, a specific language disability, specific learning disability, which is essentially dyslexia. But I can count on 2 fingers the number of times that the word dyslexia was used in an IEP meeting.
Yeah.
So schools didn't have to address it. Now, I don't want to make schools sound like the bad guys. Believe me,
Right.
I'm
No,
sure
of
they
course
wanted
not.
to,
Right.
and there's a lot of uh, great educators, and
Oh yeah.
everyone wants this for our
And
kids, but
educators have
yeah,
their own battles too. I mean, I've
exactly.
seen them where they struggle because they do want to get the kids, their kids help and resources and guidance, but you're also dealing with, you know, just the business of education. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I taught in higher education for better half of a decade, and I saw that
Oh,
even in that system.
mhm,
And so I agree with what you're saying. It could be
mhm,
down to the budget, down to the money. What's the
exactly.
bottom dollar say? And that's really where I think that's disheartening because, we want the best for our children. So how do we make that work? On both
Exactly.
sides. How do we
Mhm.
how do we come to that solution? Which is way above my pay grade, but
It is, and but
but if you want
it
my
shouldn't be.
opinion, I've got it.
Oh my
I'm
gosh,
just
I know, and just think of how much better this would be for the child, the teacher. How much better kids would do, and we don't want to teach to the test, but if they could read, 20%
right.
of the, 15 to 20% of people have dyslexia. That's a huge portion of your
It is.
classroom. So it would be better for the parents, clearly, and better for our workforce.
Yes.
So it's a no-brainer, but,
Right. Well,
it
and
takes
it's just another
funding.
form again of learning differently. Like when Drayson was diagnosed with his autism, the way I approached it was that he just has to learn things differently. You know, in order to be able to help him, I needed to find different modalities and different ways to help him learn. And it was outside of the confines of regular education, right? Just it had to be different. So, Megan, this kind of leads me into my next question. In your experience, how does dyslexia affect a child or adult emotionally? And what support do you feel that families can provide with that?
Okay, so imagine you're an 8-year-old in the classroom. It's your turn to read, and you're really struggling. You're going slowly, and then you hear a heavy sigh from another student.
Yeah.
Or somebody says, hurry up. Or God forbid they say something like, can't you read? Okay, so what happens? We immediately internalize that. We feel deep embarrassment and we feel shame, right? And of course, we don't want to participate anymore. And now we have incredible anxiety about reading out loud and our ability and comparing ourselves as far as that question that we all ask ourselves sometimes, what's wrong with me? Right? So, and we'll come back
Yeah.
to that in just a second when we talk about how parents can support.
Yeah.
For adults, I attended the International Dyslexia Association conference in
Yeah.
2025, and one of our speakers was Tim Odegaard, and he is well known in the field of dyslexia. He's a
Okay.
researcher and happens to have dyslexia himself.
Wow.
And he started to tell us a story about when he was in 4th or 5th grade and really struggling reader. And the school said to his mom, he has to jump through these hoops or he can't pass it in the next grade.
Right.
So he jumped through all the hoops, and then they still didn't want to pass him to the next grade. So his mom went to bat for him, and he did get to go to the next grade. That's the good news. But while he was telling this story, he started to tear up.
Yeah.
And that was my biggest takeaway of the day,
Yeah.
because this affects us all the way into adulthood. And here we have a leading researcher in dyslexia, and he's
Right.
still feeling this way.
Yeah.
Also, if you're an adult and you go to college, it takes you 3 times as long to study.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really affects us emotionally and
Mm-hmm.
socially.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all these ramifications.
Yeah.
So uh, I mentioned we have that question, what's wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the most important question that you can ask yourself if you have dyslexia is, what's right with me?
Right.
Because people with dyslexia have many strengths, and
Mm-hmm.
teachers and parents, we need to know what these are so we can point them out to the child.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So, yeah, people with dyslexia often are great with visual thinking. For
Yes.
example, director Steven Spielberg has dyslexia, and he credits his dyslexia for being able to translate what he sees in his brain to what we see on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
And
Interesting. That's fascinating.
yes, and they're also very good with spatial awareness. They can
Mm-hmm.
see and manipulate 3D visuals in their head. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yes.
our physicists and engineers, those companies are now realize that having dyslexia is not a problem, and in fact, it can be a benefit.
Yeah.
And people are very good, can be very good with pattern recognition if you have dyslexia. So that's
Yes.
great, yeah, in the fields of computers and computer science and languages,
Yeah.
because we see a lot of patterns, among other things.
I've
Uh,
seen Drayson observe a lot of patterns before too. Like he's very lines, geometric shapes. I can see that a lot in him. And I saw a
yes,
lot of the emotional effects that you're describing as well, because he's also paired with global developmental delay, Drayson is. And so they would, the auditory, right? There's a pause waiting about 5 to 10 seconds, really, which is a long
oh
period of
yes.
time to wait, right?
Mhm.
But what was happening was they were like, read this passage, read this passage, read this passage. And they would say it so rapidly to him that he would immediately get overwhelmed and shut down.
Yes, of course, and they're saying it multiple times. So
Yes.
now instead of processing, he has auditory noise essentially. He needs to
Mm-hmm.
be able to think about it. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yes.
So interesting. But I love that you're also pointing out the gifts behind
Oh, yeah,
dyslexia,
yes.
because I think that that's also a misconception, that it's not, that there's not maybe some potential positive sides to this, right?
Yes, and again, it's not a matter of intelligence at
Right.
all. And
Yes.
people with dyslexia can be incredible holistic thinkers, right? They
Yes.
see the big picture. So, for example, the chef Jamie Oliver has dyslexia,
Yes.
and he completely overhauled the British school lunch system. And it
Wow.
wasn't easy because they were like American kids, they wanted their chicken nuggets,
Yeah.
and so he stuck with it and really saw that had the vision that we can change this.
Yeah.
And then finally, it's not the last strength they have, but they can be very empathetic. So
Yeah.
that doesn't just mean recognizing emotions, but it's also reading a room,
Right.
right?
Right.
And yes, and so actors such as Keira Knightley, who has dyslexia, can benefit from it in that way, being able to
Wow.
see, yeah, that emotional piece. So,
That's
yes,
amazing. And I love that you're bringing this all to light too, because we do talk a lot about, I try not to make it so doom and gloom, right? Because it does sound daunting.
yes,
In any case, ASD, dyslexia, any diagnosis that you're handed to about your child, I think it's daunting. And
yes.
at first, right off the bat, because, like you said, there are a lot of misconceptions about dyslexia.
Yes.
I know
Yeah.
that you use, and it's called Orton-Gillingham, right? I did
Yes.
not. Okay, thank God I got that right.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So I know that this is a specific based approach. Why do you find that it's so effective for readers with dyslexia?
Orton-Gillingham is as much of a who question as a what question.
Okay.
So, yeah, Dr. Samuel Orton was a neuropsychiatrist in the 1930s. He started to be able to identify that this was sound-based
Okay.
and work with struggling readers and finding a method that worked for them. And Anna Gillingham was a psychologist in the 1930s, and she took this method and helped develop it and teach readers to
Okay.
read. Yes.
Okay.
So, and it's specific. It has to be very specific. It has to be sequential,
Mm-hmm.
and it has to be cumulative. So we always want to be building on the last skill, and we're always going to go back to the previous skill and review that so that we
Mm-hmm.
make sure that we have that good foundation. And most importantly, it's multisensory.
Okay.
So yeah, so the three modes of of learning
Mm-hmm.
that work best for people are visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. And
Okay.
usually we identify as a certain type of learner, like I'm a visual learner.
Right.
Uh, yeah, but what I found out as I studied dyslexia more is that the other modes help reinforce whatever strength you have. So we're
Interesting.
going to do, yes, always do have visual, auditory, and kinesthetic methods to teach the different sounds in the sound system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I
So,
love that you mentioned the sequential part because that's patterns, like we were just talking about, some of the gifts, the patterns, the
yes,
consistency and the patterns. And I noticed that with Drayson when we started going through dyslexia tutoring. I noticed that very profoundly, like, oh, there's a pattern he's trying to recognize.
yes.
Um, and it paired with the auditory, of course, because I
Mhm.
completely like blew past that one until I figured it out. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea.
Yes.
Um, So interesting. And so I can see why it's effective for readers with dyslexia, and it brings in that structure because you're bringing in other. Do you find that most education curriculum is visual based over auditory or kinesthetic, or do you think, because I think teachers infuse all of it, right? But I think
Right.
predominantly we're the more visual education piece
Yes.
is in play versus the other two. Would you
Yes.
agree with that?
I do,
Okay,
and it's getting better.
good.
Teachers really know, about,
They're
uh,
starting to see that. Yeah.
oh, definitely, yes, and provide that auditory support. Not usually the kinesthetic, unless they know that the child has dyslexia. But yeah, they're
Right.
getting better about that auditory support.
That's
Mhm.
great.
Mhm.
I know. So, how do you help students and families find and build on unique strengths that often accompany dyslexia?
So we talked earlier about what the strengths are.
Mm-hmm.
So get to know your child, and then figure out if what their strengths are from the list that I said or other ones,
Mm-hmm.
because that's not a complete list. And then do things to help support them. So we were just talking about auditory learning.
Right.
Okay, this is so important. So even if your child has dyslexia, they don't have to have that interruption in their vocabulary building because
Okay.
they can listen to stories, and that is every bit as effective at helping
Mm-hmm.
build vocabulary.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. So,
We read to Drayson a lot.
yes,
You know, um, my ex husband and I read a lot to Drayson when he was little. And I
yes,
think that's why it almost went under the radar because he was picking up on that part of it, but not it like seriously, like we couldn't figure it out. So
yes,
that makes perfect sense what you're saying. Yeah, because
yes.
we still I still read to him. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Excellent. And parents, when you're in the car with your younger kids, please don't have them watching videos.
Yes.
Okay. So if we did, and again, I'm not trying to shame anyone because you don't
Right.
do better till you know better.
Right.
But if we took an episode of SpongeBob
Right.
versus maybe a story of Magic Treehouse,
Right.
okay, that's a series for kids
Yes.
about a brother and sister who time travel. And
Yes. I
it's
love
night
that one.
and day. Yes, me too. It's night and day, the complexity of language, okay?
Yes.
So even in a cartoon, you're going to just hear dialogue,
Yes.
uh, right? And so you're not going to hear the words, oh, SpongeBob exclaimed,
Yeah.
or he repeated, right? So we're just building vocabulary that way alone. Then
Mhm.
the complexity of the sentence written, you're describing things. So you have many
Mhm.
more complex sentences in a story.
Right.
So that complex syntax is getting built. And yeah, the vocabulary is just so much richer, so many more adjectives and adverbs. So
Mhm.
adding vocabulary in that way. And that's why it's so important. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
That
So
makes that
definitely, yes. And
yeah.
let's remember that we're hardwired for language. Language developed over 100,000 years ago.
Yes.
Written systems didn't start till about 5,000 years ago, but that was only for the very elite. And then the
Okay.
printing press wasn't until 500 or 600 years ago,
Right.
right? And even then, that was still for certain classes. We
Right.
haven't had formal instruction on reading except for the last 200 to 300 years. So
Right.
300 years compared to 100,000 years, right?
Right.
It's amazing that 80% of us can read. So,
We're just babies.
yes.
We're just we're just little babies, right? Well, what gives you hope about the future for dyslexia awareness and education? Because this is, this is something that I talk about actively as well too, not just the autism awareness piece, but dyslexia. Like I was saying earlier in the show, I've had a lot of other people on the show talk about dyslexia. But this is a subject very near and dear to my heart. And I think that all the modalities, I want parents and families to be able to pick what they feel will be the best modality for them in their household to use. But, what gives you hope about the future of dyslexia awareness and education?
Well, now we have screening, universal screening in 43
Yeah,
states.
which you mentioned that earlier. So I was just about to ask that question. Like 43 states now are so it's mandatory screening in the education system. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
Yes.
Okay. We
And
just need all
yes,
50. Come on, guys. Get in the
I know.
game.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. We gotta get those last 7 states over the line. Okay,
Right?
and more teachers, uh, know what Orton-Gillingham methods are and
Yes.
can incorporate them into the classroom.
Yes.
Parents are getting educated, right? They're
Yes.
educating themselves.
Yes.
And also science. We now have the benefit of functional MRI studies.
Yes. There's a
So
lot of evidence base now about coming in through with dyslexia, correct? Yeah.
exactly, and if we look at that brain of a person who has dyslexia versus a typical reader, what we'll see in the left hemisphere is in a typical reader, there's an area lit up called the angular gyrus.
Okay. Say
Okay,
that 3 times really fast.
yeah, exactly. You see how I have trouble with that. And so that is where it's right in front of the occipital lobe,
Okay.
uh, where we get our visual information, and it's right above our temporal lobe, which is where we get our sound and language from. Okay, so we're
Okay.
taking that visual information, that letter, and we're adding the sound to it, right? That's
Right.
fine. Well, we see that that area is not lighting up in people who have dyslexia for the most part. All
Right.
right. So science is showing us and backing up uh, that this is sound based and that
Interesting.
they're not mixing that sound and visual piece of information. So yes.
Okay.
And now we also have speech to text and text to speech, and more kids have those accommodations in the classroom. But I want to
Okay.
reiterate here that's not a replacement for learning to read. They still need to
Right.
learn how to read.
Right.
Yes.
So it's used as a tool to help them to get to that level that they need to be at.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
That makes
Mhm.
sense.
And if
That
they're an
makes sense.
auditory, yeah, if they're an auditory learner, that's one of their strengths, and that's reinforces that.
That's
Hmm.
amazing. The science is where, I geek out anyway about science driven things, but I love that there's more and more scientific stuff coming out and being taught to parents, because I think that just helps. Knowledge is power for me. The more I know, the more I understand, the more I can help Drayson. And
Hmm.
so I love that you're also explaining that it literally is down to like where it is in the brain center and
Hmm.
what that does. So when somebody is going through dyslexia tutoring or is being helped for dyslexia, is it just remapping that brain pattern, or does that center start to activate because of
But
the different modalities? How does that
I
help?
haven't seen fMRI studies of before treatment and after treatment, so
That
I'm
would be
not sure.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would. And there's in people with dyslexia, they have a lot more right brain activity.
Okay.
Uh, yes, so I'm not sure as far, but let's remember also that this is a spectrum. So
Right.
some kids, will need so much more repetition, and
Yeah.
others will just need a little bit, and then they're on their way.
And they're on
So
their way.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, and um I've absolutely loved this conversation. And before we close out, I really want to ask one last question of what resources or strategies would you recommend for parents, especially if their child is just beginning to struggle with reading? You've talked a little bit about some of the signs and things to watch out for, but what recommendations do you have for parents and families specifically?
Yes, the International Dyslexia Association website,
Okay,
phenomenal resource. You can go
great.
on there and study what the signs of dyslexia, some of them that we've talked about today, the science behind it, what you can do as a parent, and what Orton-Gillingham is. And also, they have a tab to show you, okay, who are the leaders in different industries who also have dyslexia. And so we're reminding our kids great things can come from this.
That's amazing. And I
Yeah.
love that that's incorporated into that website that you're describing, because, again, we tend to go towards the negative side of things, right? Because it wasn't intentional for me to go to that negative space with Drayson with dyslexia. I think I was more in the mode of like, what can I do to help him? So
Mhm.
you start going down those rabbit holes and it becomes a little daunting, right? So
Yes.
and I think that I naturally kind of was entering that mind space of being not negative, but just not open minded, that there's so many wonderful things with dyslexia. So I really appreciate that you brought that to light today.
Yes, yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. What's right with me? That's the question I want people to remember,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
parents to remember. And also,
Yeah.
there are books out there. Overcoming Dyslexia by Sally Shaywitz is a book. You can read up on different aspects of dyslexia. And then my website is By the Book Tutoring.
Yes.
And so you can go to my website. I have a resource section that has links to different things. Some of the resources that I already talked about, plus movies about people with dyslexia,
Oh,
which is always
wonderful.
compelling. So kids don't feel alone. That's such an important part for any of us when we feel
Yes.
like we're alone. So
Yes.
yes. So yeah.
And are you helping children and families across the country? What are you doing now?
Yes.
I know you said to go to your website, but tell our audience a little bit about what you offer.
Yes, so I'm trained in an Orton-Gillingham system called Barton Reading and Spelling System. And
Okay.
Susan Barton developed this, and she has a website, Barton Reading, I believe it's bartonreading.com.
Right.
And that has another great resource.
Great.
And so, yeah, so I'm using that to help kids and adults learn to read.
Great.
And that's my new passion.
Great.
And I'm just so appreciative of the background I have, because now I know both the oral aspect
Yeah.
and I'm able to teach people. I know the Orton-Gillingham principles, so I'm
That's
helping,
fantastic.
yeah, people to read more
That's so
fluently, I
great.
should say. Again, they can already read, but they need to learn to read more fluently.
Right. That's awesome. Meagan, thank you so much for being on the show today and for your time and your energy and your expertise. I'm forever grateful for this conversation, honestly. Like I just love how I've even learned a few things just in this interview today about dyslexia that, are good for me to know because I'm continually helping Drayson. So I really do appreciate your time and your energy today. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for this platform. I absolutely love this podcast
Thank
because you
you.
have the parents' perspective, and you've told us all about how much you've gone to bat for your son, and I really
Yes.
appreciate it. So thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Oh, thank you so much. That makes me happy. Thanks.
Okay.
Sometimes I need to be cheered on too. So thank you so much for saying that
Oh,
to me.
you
I
are a
really
beacon.
appreciate that.
Yeah, you're a
Yeah.
beacon. Believe me.
Oh, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. Well, for those of you interested, I will post all of Meagan's information into the show notes. So feel free to please contact her, ask her questions, reach out if you have any questions or just want to know a little bit more about dyslexia. I know she would love to hear from you, and tell her I sent you along the way as well.
Yes.
This concludes our episode for today. If you have questions, comments, or even a show topic that you would like to hear about, please feel free to send me an email at info@piecesformypuzzle.com. I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram if you have not done so already, or feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you like what you're hearing, please continue to spread the word so that we can also encourage families that have neurodivergent kids or even adults, and we can continue to spread the word and encourage more resources for those families. And feel free to give us a good rating on your preferred podcast platform of choice. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, keep working on your puzzle, and remember, you don't have to have it all solved in a day. Take care.